Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, I'm Polly Wells, the director of We Began to Sing. And on Pete Seeger's birthday, perhaps we can set aside the anxieties of the current moment and enjoy that we're here to celebrate someone who made us smile and helped us feel in touch with our better selves. A folk singer and an activist who changed the world and changed us. We will hear some wonderful songs too. So with us today are 6 musicians who knew Pete well, and each of them has a deep commitment to making the world better, just as Pete did. So let me introduce them now. I'll start with 2 folks you'll recognize from the film, Annie Patterson and Peter Blood. Hi, guys.
Hi.
We're in Amherst, Massachusetts. And from Northern California are Pat Humphries and Sandy O, the fantastic duo Emma's Revolution. Hi there.
Hi. Nice to be with you.
Good to have you. And in upstate New York is Reggie Harris, a consummate musician and storyteller. Hi, Reggie.
Hi, Polly. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And all the way from Dorset, England, beloved singer and activist, Billy Bragg. Great to see you, Billy.
As soon as you introduce me, my phone starts ringing. It's kind of like having sat here all this time. I'm just going to switch it off. You can carry on without me. I'll just switch the damn thing off. Sorry.
I think he staged that. You know, he's a funny guy.
I'm not here. I'm really sorry. Goodbye. I'm going to put it in the drawer. I'm sorry. This is live. This is live. This is what happens when you do live broadcasts. Sorry, everyone. I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed.
They're calling to say you look good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off asking you all about Pete, but the film gives us a window into how Pete inspired Annie and Peter in their work. So I'd like to take a moment to hear from the others how Pete Seeger mattered to each of you personally. And I thought, Reggie Harris, maybe let's start with you.
Well, after watching the film and thinking about Pete, I realized that, first of all, I grew up in a community in Philadelphia that I was surrounded by sound. I was surrounded by song. I was surrounded by music by people who had migrated on the Great Migration from the South, and they brought their songs with them. So I have some very deep treasured memories of sitting in my church growing up and having song well up around me and hearing people's feet on the floor. And so singing together was something that I came into the world knowing that people did. But as often happens, as I grew older and saw performers out, becoming famous and, people adulating, all these personalities, I myself wanted to have more of an opportunity for people to hear me sing. It was meeting Pete that really sort of reconnected me. Pete and Bernice Johnson Reagan and some of the other elders who reconnected me to the power of song in community. And being with him and watching the way that he led people in song just reconnected me to what I knew to be true in my childhood.
Wonderful. Pat Humphries, how would you answer that question?
Well, I grew up in the Cuyahoga Valley in northeast Ohio on a tributary of the Cuyahoga River. And as Randy Newman's song reminds us, that there was a point in time when that river was so polluted that it caught fire. And Pete came to the Cleveland area and brought his experience of having started the organization Hudson River Sloop Clearwater to clean up the Hudson River there in New York State. And I was really curious. I grew up about 35 miles from Kent State University, and I had seen the tragedy that happened there. I'd seen that reflected in the music of Neil Young, but that was kind of an abstract sort of thing for me. So when Pete came to Cleveland and talked about the river that I lived near, and talked about how to clean that up, I was really intrigued. And then, years later, when we got to meet, it really brought that whole power of song concept home to me.
Sandy, how would you answer that question?
I think one thing that's different from what's been spoken about the power of song is this concept of people's history. When I was in school as a kid, I hated history class. Like, who wanted to remember dates of wars? Like, just was not gripping to me at all. But learning it, starting to know Pete through Pat. Already he was a historical figure, and I never thought I would just get to hang out with him. But he always had some kind of historical anecdote or story to share with us whenever we would see him. And it just kind of tied me into the idea that learning history from the people's perspective and not from the perspective of the wars or the government was a whole different story, a whole different feel. And I always knew when Pat would answer the phone and say, "Hi, Pete," I knew that she would be on the phone for like the next hour because Pete had that much or two to say. So he really taught me the importance of passing on story.
Lovely. Billy Bragg, how would you answer that question?
Well, I'd riff off of what Sandy was saying, really. Pete, you think about Pete. He rode the rails with Woody. He marched with Dr. King. He stood beside Paul Robeson. He stood up against McCarthyism. He is like living history. And, for those of us who, write music that's progressive, those of us who are part of the protest tradition, in many ways, Woody Guthrie is the father of our tradition, but Pete was a representative of that tradition still with us. Woody, anyone who of my generation who knows Woody knows him through Dylan, really. But Pete and that generation who actually really did know Woody, they were really valuable people to talk to. And it was my great privilege to spend some time with Pete, particularly when we were working on the Mermaid Avenue project. The very first gig we ever did was when Woody was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Nora Guthrie asked me to play some of the demo, they were just demos at the time, some of the first tunes I'd written for the Mermaid Avenue project. And I was really worried because not only Pete was there, Fred Hellerman was there, Harold Leventhal. I played the songs and Pete came up and said, "Great job, a really good job there, son." And it gave me the confidence to sort of think, well, maybe we could carry this off. And that's what he was about. He was all about carry it on, as his famous slogan had it.
That's great. Thank you. So now I'd like to just open up the frame a little and talk about what you think Pete's legacy is more broadly. I thought Peter Blood could start off with you.
So Pete grew up in what we in North America anyway call he was a red diaper baby. And what that meant is that in his living room when he was a kid, there was constantly activists, progressives, people of color, union workers. And as soon as he dropped out of college, he went to Harvard, but dropped out at age 19 and started traveling around the country with Woody. Immediately, he saw any music that he did as a way of making the world a better place. And that was true throughout his entire music career, wherever he was in the world. And he hated people honoring him and trying to give him prizes and stuff like that, right? And only way he would want us to honor his legacy would be to carry on using whatever kind of work we do, whether it's musicians or teaching or anything, to make the world a better place. He would want us basically working to work for peace, work for justice, work for taking care of the environment.
Great. Annie, how do you think of Pete's legacy?
I agree with Peter. I mean, everything he said, Pete wasn't about trying to shine a light on himself. He never wanted to be in the spotlight. That's why, he just loved getting everybody singing. But the other thing about Pete that is really important to remember is he believed that hope was really important, but it didn't mean he didn't feel hopeless. There were times in his life when he knew that things looked really grim. But that's why he kept writing songs. And that's why he kept going out and singing. Because I think now in this day and age, right now, if people just take a moment and try and sing, maybe out their front door, like folks are doing outside their their apartment. When you hear other people singing with you, even from a distance, it does give you hope, even if just 2 minutes ago you felt hopeless. And that's what Pete wanted us to know.
Great. Billy, any thoughts on Pete Seeger's larger legacy? You've touched on some things already.
Yeah,
Anything to add there?
It's his role in the tradition, really, isn't it? You know, it's kind of like who is Pete Seeger to a younger generation? Well, he's that guy who stood next to Bruce Springsteen at Obama's inauguration and sang "This Land Is Your Land." And the fact that there was a guy in his 90s doing that said something about the connection that Pete had with world culture, because that wasn't just an American moment, that was a world moment, a very progressive world moment. And Pete was there and in many ways embodied it. He embodied it for that generation. And, you know, as a member of that generation that we are losing, you know, the generation that fought in the Second World War, I think he was a really good representative that they weren't just there about the kind of the capital P patriotic ideas. They were also there for the patriotic idea embodied in "This Land Is Your Land." And Pete was a great representative of that. And I think that idea of whether it's American patriotism or British patriotism or whatever, that idea of a progressive patriotism that doesn't focus on the institutions of the army and the police, but actually focuses on the principles on which a nation is founded, of liberty, of equality. He embodied that progressive patriotism for me in America, and I think that continues to be his legacy.
Great. Sandio, how would you frame Pete's legacy?
I think another piece of it is that he had big dreams and he was willing to go for it. So when he was living on the Hudson River and seeing that the river was completely polluted, but knowing the history, again, he knew his history, that river had been so important to communities forever. And he decided that something should happen and something should change. And he had this big idea. If we make a boat, people will come down to the river and see the river and fall in love with the river and want to clean the river. And he got people excited about it, and it happened. And that river is now clean enough that people can swim across that river, which they do. They have a little swim every spring, and there's even a pool that little kids can swim in. And that pool was another one of these big ideas that Pete had. So I think one of the legacies for me, and maybe for other people, is just to really dream big and go after it. This world is really created by the actions that we all take. And he was willing to say, we can do this. We can clean this river. We can sing together. We can tear down oppression in so many ways.
Great, lovely. Pat Humphries, what would you say?
Well, you know, what was sort of largely a consequence of his experience with McCarthyism, and largely was the sort of the brainchild of Toshi, his wife and partner. He went from being, you know, a big stage performer during the 50s and early 60s, and very famous in, you know, lots of television appearances, to having to do something else. You know, all of their gigs disappeared overnight. And Toshi said, go to the camps and to the churches and to the colleges. And he did that. And in doing that, he made the metaphor of the hope and the strength and the sense of unity that he created in a room with a group of people singing together, and that sense of strength in numbers. He made that real. He activated that metaphor. He was incredibly patient and listened very carefully to young people of all ages, and has spent the greater part of his later years singing almost exclusively to children. And he was very attuned to the fact that he was planting a seed in all of those children, that sense of power, that sense of community, that sense of anything is possible if you're able to get the message through, not just through the head, but, you know, there's a way in which song reaches us. so powerfully and kind of through the back door, that inspires us to really be our best, most conscious, most just, most powerful self. And he really demonstrated that over and over and over again to us.
Beautiful. Reggie Harris, how do you answer that question?
Well, anybody who's spent any time around folk music and music audiences knows that for the most part, as we gather, they're mostly white. And Pete was always aware of that. Pete reached out. Pete went to Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia to the civil rights movement. He had a lot of colleagues. He had a lot of folks in the communities of color that he reached out to, not as Pete Seeger, but as a colleague who came in. And he was always aware that the audiences needed to be more diverse. And he took action to do that. One year at the revival, I was talking to him, and he was looking around revival, and he was saying, we really need to get more people of color here. And he had an idea. So he said, do you have any contacts in and around New York and New Jersey that we might be able to use? And I thought in that moment, yeah, I do. My cousin is married to the president of the Harlem Chamber of Commerce. And I thought, well, I could reach out to him, and if you would be willing to talk to him, and we could talk about, doing some concerts or bringing some more performers of color to the festival. He said, that'd be great. So I called up my cousin's husband, Lloyd, and I was trying to figure out how to make him aware of who Pete was, and so I got on the phone and I called Lloyd, and I said, I was talking to Pete Seeger, and I didn't explain who Pete Seeger was. Lloyd is in the African American community. He's putting on acts like James Brown, and and so I tried to explain how this connection would come. And Lloyd said, oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's get, you have Pete's number? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, let's get him on the phone. So I dialed the number, and he connected us. And he gets on, and he says, Mr. Seeger, it's so great to talk to you again. And I went, wait a minute. He didn't mention that he knew Pete. And Pete says, oh yeah, Mr. Williams, it's wonderful to talk to you. And he says, I'm so happy. We honored you 2 years ago, and I hear you want to do something with the community and bring people in. And I'm thinking, where did this come from? They had the most wonderful conversation, and we started a whole new initiative in Harlem to bring the issues of Clearwater and environmentalism in. So, this was what Pete did constantly. And he did it a lot of times behind the scenes, as Toshi also did. So my connection to him is certainly as a musician, but it's also as a cultural ambassador who connected people.
Nice. Thank you. At this point, we're going to hear some music, and we have Billy Bragg doing his rendition of a famous song, the Internationale.
I'll have to stand up to do this. Hope you don't mind, folks.
Are you gonna sing it live?
No, you're going to do that tape on. But I will be standing up. There'll be a slight change of picture.
Oh yeah,
just in case.
Billy kindly pre-recorded this because where he lives, the internet is in great demand right now.
It's
and he doesn't
Sunday
always
evening. Yeah, people phoning me up, everything. It's like mad here. It's mad. I could disappear at any moment.
Yeah, so we didn't want that to happen, so we pre-recorded his singing just the other day. So we can roll that tape now.
Thank you. The thing that most makes me think of Pete Seeger is the Internationale, because in 1989, the Vancouver Folk Festival, Pete invited me to come on stage at the end of the whole festival, the finale of his set, and sing that song in tribute to the protesters in Tiananmen Square who'd been massacred just a month before by the Chinese state. And Pete wanted to send out a solidarity message to them, and he invited folk singers from different countries to come and sing a verse of their nation's Internationale. He wanted me to sing the British version. He came to see me in the chow tent at the festival. He sat down with me, he said, can you come on and sing your version? I'm like, Pete, the lyrics to the British version are so archaic, arise ye starvelings from their slumbers. And he just said, well, why don't you just write a new verse? And before I could say to him, Pete, it's the Internationale, you can't write a new verse. He'd kind of picked up a scrap of some flyer paper, got a pencil from somewhere, closed his eyes and began singing under his breath the original French lyrics whilst writing out a literal translation for me, which he kind of gave to me like a piece of homework and said, here you go, take that away, you've got 24 hours, come back with a new verse. Now, you'll know that there are some people in folk music you can't say no to, and Pete Seeger was one of them. So 24 hours later, I duly returned with my verse that I'd written. I sang it that night. Pete liked it. I liked it. And later that year, the Berlin Wall came down. And over the next 12 months, the scourge of totalitarianism was swept away and thrown into the dustbin of history, rightly so. But I felt at the same time our culture, our left-wing culture, was also being thrown into the trash can. And I felt that if perhaps I built on that verse and rewrote a whole new Internationale, I might be able to salvage that song and that tradition of internationalism from the dumpster. So I did that. I wrote a new version and I tried it out on Pete. He liked it. Peggy Seeger, Ewan McCall, Dick Gock, and people that I respected. And I eventually recorded an album, The Internationale, of which that was the title track. And I'm pleased to say that now many left-wing choirs, certainly in the UK, if they sing the Internationale, they more often sing my lyrics. And if you buy the Little Red Songbook, the IWW Songbook, it's right next to the original lyric of the Internationale. So that's thanks to Pete. And that's why I want to sing it for you now. Just give me a second to get the key. I'll be right back. Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give, and end the vanity of nations. We've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armour. We defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That line, let no one build walls to divide us. It calls to mind just how good Pete Seeger was at bringing us together. And yet here we all are, forced apart physically. And also the pandemic is really already dividing us between the haves and the have-nots. And I just wanted you to think about, if Pete were here today, what would he be focusing on? Billy, do you want to start?
Well, speaking as a European, I'd like to think he would be focusing on the idea of universal healthcare. I think the nature of this pandemic has revealed a lot of things about the people who have and the people who do not have, in my country as well as yours, around the world. But for those of us who live in countries with accessible health service-free, on demand, it's not perfect here. We, in the UK, we've been very slow in getting on top of the pandemic. We're probably going to have the worst death rate in Europe. But people know that when they go to hospital, that they'll be able to get onto a ventilator. And of all the things when I come to the United States of America that look odd to me, and a lot of them do look odd, the one thing I understand the gun thing. You live in a country, there's a bear on the California flag. I kind of get that gun thing, but the lack of a free health service, I'd like to think Pete would focus on that, particularly as someone of his age, because in my country, it's the oldest who are being worse hit by the COVID. And so I'd like to think that we'll put this issue on the front burner in the United States of America and make it an election issue, and that Pete will be there.
Sandio, what do you think Pete would focus on?
Well, I don't really think I do get the gun issue, Billy. I hear you about people do hunt and that kind of thing, but it's out of control here. And I
agree. I mean, I didn't mean to be flip. I didn't mean to be flippant about it, but
right.
But in some ways, the health service thing is even worse to me in some ways, because it
absolutely
affects everyone.
And they're connected, right? So people fear each other so much that they fear taking care of one another, that somehow it's going to take something away from them, which is such the lie, right? But what the thing I've been thinking about is, just when you said that about guns, it made me think of what's been happening about the people here in this country who are protesting social distancing, which is unbelievable. That they are saying, I don't want to have to keep socially distant. I should be able to do everything I want. And those people have recently been showing up on the streets or in Capitol buildings, white people with guns. And Pete would have known, and he would have been right out ahead, the way so many activists are saying now, if you want to see what white privilege is, look at that. You got white people with guns storming a Capitol building, and the cops just stand there with their masks on. If people of color took up arms at any moment, they would have been shot, killed, the whole thing. And I think that Pete was really, as Reggie said, Pete was really on the front edge of making sure that his privilege allowed him to help break down doors and break down access for people of color as performers or even, activists in the civil rights movement. So I think he would be very outraged by that and would have used his voice to bring attention to that right now.
Thank you. Pat Humphries.
Well, I think we see this particular administration that we have in Washington and all the corporations and the billionaires that keep this guy and his people in power quaking in their boots at the idea of people staying home, whether it's for their own protection or not, because they realize that all of us are the engine that keep those people wealthy. And Pete and his father before him, as a classical musician, they were both great at pointing out the ways in which the wealthy and the so-called powerful can just be undermined in a moment if the workers and if the people, the rest of us, were to realize our power, or were to just sit down, for instance, and not engage those wheels that keep the money going to the top all the time. And he had such an engaging way and kind of charismatic and playful way of pointing that out, all the hypocrisy. He was very good at communicating across gender lines, race lines, class lines, and he was quite committed to communicating with folks who held different points of view, and he was particularly gifted, I think, at reaching those folks. When we sang at the little local funeral that they had for him and for he and Toshi, right there in Beacon, New York, the stream of local people that came through were, all of the Clearwater people and the white folkies came in, but so did everybody from the Baptist church around the corner. So did all of the vets from the VFW hall, playing taps for him. Really everybody filed through that door because they felt heard and felt connected to Pete and his legacy. He spoke in a language that not all of us are as skilled at speaking in, that reached to an incredibly diverse group of people.
Yeah, Reggie, he was the great communicator, wasn't he?
He
Do you
was.
have anything more to add to that?
Well, I would think, he would certainly still be on the environmental edge. He would recognize that in this time of COVID-19 that the administration has taken every opportunity to roll back more environmental protections, and
they're connected too.
He would be all over that.
Yeah.
And I think he would also recognize that that kind of thing is impacting communities of color, and also, but he just had a real passion for also getting people singing. And as we now realize that we have to sing online, I think Pete would figure out a way to be all over that. Connect with people, not so much as we said, not so much as performer, but song leader, community activist.
Interesting. Annie Patterson, what do you think Pete would be up to if you were here?
I'll tell you what he would be doing. He'd be chopping wood every morning, no matter what, because he was a man who really liked his routines at the homestead when he was home. But I think also he mentored so many artists. He would have known what Paul Robeson said about artists are the gatekeepers of truth and civilization's radical voice. And so he mentored people by writing them postcards every day. He wrote thousands of postcards. And some of us, have our collections that we just really feed us, because, to have somebody like Pete say, you're doing something important, keep it up. He'd be doing that right now, for sure.
And that would help the postal workers. And so that's a good thing to take on again.
Yeah.
Just bought postcard stamps last week.
Nice.
Peter Blood, what do you have to say?
So, as a white man of a privileged background, I was trained to say I have all the answers and I should be in charge, and it's been really hard to unlearn that. And Pete was a model, as other people have talked about. He modeled forming relationships with people who were different from him, whether those were people of color, whether they were young people, whether they were people, union workers. Well, he was a union worker, but still, the point is, he would want us to be forming relationships with people who are outside of our own silo, outside of our own community, and use that to listen to the people who ordinarily are not listened to.
Wow, incredible role model when you think of all the things you guys just mentioned. Well, thank you. We're going to turn now to Reggie Harris, who's going to sing a song that he wrote about Pete. So tell us about it, Reggie.
Well, I have to thank my friend Amy Blake for inviting me to her classroom on the morning after Pete died, because I wasn't quite sure what to do that morning. And so I went in to talk to and sing for and with her second graders, and it was in that song session we were talking about Pete, and we were talking about all of the things that he did, and the students knew very much about his environmental stance and his work for civil rights justice. And as I was taking questions from the students, one of the young girls asked, "Where did Mr. Seeger live?" And I said, well, he lived right near the river that he loved so much, the Hudson River. And I started to go into something, and she raised her hand again. I said, what's that? And she said, the Hudson River. It's an estuary. It flows both ways. And I thought, oh, my goodness. I would have never known that in second grade. And well, I said, he lived next to the river, and I thought, he lived high over the Hudson. And as soon as I said that phrase, I said to my friend, the teacher, Amy, get me a piece of paper. I need to write that down. So the song is called High Over the Hudson. News came over the air tonight. Pete Seeger went sailing today. Set out on the Hudson about 9 o'clock, searching for new songs to play. Passed by Bear Mountain, making great time, as the water slapped hard on the bow. At Storm King he turned that boat into the wind, set the old Woody G on the prow. Now he's high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. High on the breeze as it cuts through the trees, Pete, you're not sailing alone. No, you're high over the Hudson. You got one hell of a view. Now your battles are won, a new journey's begun. Pete, we're singing with you of time and rivers flowing. The seasons make a song. To sing along. A troubadour's life has its ups and its downs. Of that there's so much that's been said. Pete spoke out for justice year after year, a leader who actually led. He sang out for freedom, he sang out for peace, taught through the power of song. Ahead of his time in all seasons of life, he kept us all singing along. Now he's high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. High on the breeze as it cuts through the trees, Pete, you're not sailing alone. No, you're high over the Hudson. You still got one hell of a view. Now your battles are won, a A new journey's begun. Pete, we're singing with you. Odetta and Mary say, welcome, good friend. Woody and Faith both agree that you lived your passion for 94 years, and you lived it with integrity. Now we as your children and we as your friends must take up your mission of song. As Toshi yells out with a smile on her lips, hey Peter, what took you so long? And now he's high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. High on the breeze as it cuts through the trees, Pete, you're not sailing alone. No, you're high over the Hudson, you still got one hell of a view. Now your battles are won, a new journey's begun. Pete, we're singing with you. And we who must join in can stand aside no longer. Now let the songs begin.
Wow.
Fabulous.
What an amazing tribute. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.
I had to mute us because I knew we were going to sing along. And then I needed to find the words, and I found it in your book, Annie and Peter.
Oh, great. So I'm going to take a moment to read some questions from other people besides me. So anyone who wants to chime in can do so. Just wave at me or something. How have you connected with your audiences during the pandemic, and how is it going? Pluses and minuses. Anybody want to take that on?
I'm happy to.
Sandy? Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to say something. You know, when that moment when all the gigs disappeared was really scary. That's just how we make a living, and it was shocking. And then we had to move quickly to learn the tech. So we do concerts online. We do songwriting workshops online. We do a workshop called Learn an Emma's Revolution Song. And then we get to do things like this. And the pluses are that people can, first of all, it feels like we're connected, even though we're not in the same room with you all. It still feels connected, and that's amazing. And then people from all over can come to a concert. So if we hadn't been, like a town in Mississippi that we hadn't been to in a long time, can listen at the same time as folks right near us here in the Sacramento Valley and people all around the world. So that is an amazing silver lining from all of this. And plus I feel better not putting out all those fossil fuels in our traveling.
Yeah.
So those are the upsides.
We've also connected with song leaders, other song leaders around the country, online, and done some events with them. And you know, hundreds of people log on, and just for the opportunity to sing. I mean, everybody's muted because Zoom, you know, doesn't, because of the delay on Zoom, but still everybody has the experience of singing all together, and that's been really, really helpful in remaining connected.
Oh, that's great. Anyone else have a thought?
Yeah, I think, you know,
Reggie?
the just what Pat and Sandy have said, you know, the act of getting online and making connections, and I think it's forced all of us to be more, a little more creative and a little bit more thoughtful about some of the, I won't say ruts that we're in, but we've gotten used to doing things a certain way. I know for one thing, bringing people into your home. I've gotten messages from people that said, I mean, people see us out and about in concert halls and churches and synagogues and wherever they see us. And people have said, oh my goodness, I'm actually getting a chance to see a part of your house, to learn something about you personally. And I think for most of us at first, it was like, oh my God, they're going to see in my house.
I did tidy up a bit today behind me. I've got a lot of stuff in the basement on this white mess. But I find because I'm sorry, button, Reggie, have you not finished? I'm sorry, mate. Carry on.
Oh, I was just going to say it's made us a little bit more personal to people. There's not that professional edge that we're always trying to break down.
Yeah.
Although having said that, Rich, I haven't done it. I think this is the first live hookup I've done because of the signal here being difficult. So what I've been doing to take part in festivals and stuff, I've been recording a couple of songs to send to the festival. But when I do that, I put on my stage clothes, I do my vocal warm-ups, I comb my hair up like I'm doing a proper gig, and I just sit here in my sort of sloppies and play my guitar. I'm really engaged in the fact that I'm playing to a lot of people, or hopefully playing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And on the other side, I've sort of regularly posted every Wednesday. I'll post a new playlist, depending on what my mood is that day. And on the weekends, I always post a song that people haven't heard. It's either a song I've written. I've been looking in the back of my archive cupboard to find stuff that was never released because it never had a proper context before. So daft things that, just curios really. But one thing I did was I recorded a song for my granddaughter based on the book We're Going on a Bear Hunt, and I just put that up a couple of weekends ago. People went mad for it. So this weekend, yesterday, I sang a version of the book The Tiger Who Came to Tea, and I put that up. So I'm kind of turning into I never would have believed this, but I seem to be turning into that kind of kids songwriter that Pete did so well, and of course Woody before him.
Right.
For years, I've been wanting to put out sort of songs that mean a lot to me and that maybe people don't know, or maybe they just strike my heart really deeply. I finally, this experience made me send out a project for the last month, whenever this started, sending out a song every day that I think will create hope in people.
So, I was thinking about this for about 5 years now. I rehearse once a week with a swing band that I'm in. We've all been singing together for over 30 years. And we rehearse with something called Jam Kazam, where it helps the delay. So I already had that technology. Plus I was a ham radio operator and an engineer. So I kind of knew how to transition, but I think the downside for me was getting over all the loss of income. I just kind of got depressed, and I had to talk myself into figuring out, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube live. I'm going to do a Facebook live. I'm going to start offering we're doing concerts for people live. And so I think the downside is just, remembering to push myself to just take more risks. And, you can know a lot about technology and still look really stupid.
But the thing is, everyone looks stupid. That's the thing. It's not just you.
Yeah,
Not just you, Annie. That's the thing. I mean, I found I did have a moment a couple of 3 weeks in maybe where I started to feel, a bit of a loss really about what was going to happen. I had to I rescheduled shows that I thought I would be doing this year. I doubt if I'll do a gig this year. I really don't think we'll have the opportunity to do that personally. But I found that scheduling stuff to do and getting into creating stuff really helped me get through it. I've found, and I have other friends who are not singer-songwriters, but who do creative stuff. And I think a lot of us have found a way. My son started doing a video diary, a vlog, and he's focused on that as well now. So I think we are able to find a way to come together. This event, for instance, probably wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the confinement. So there are positive sides to it. I think we have to keep focused on that to help ourselves get through it.
That's a great note to end on. And we have another question. Do you think Pete Seeger's work has relevance to young people today?
No.
But it should. Right?
How could it not?
I I know you're joking because the thing is, everybody here, all these musicians, they all know that when we do stuff, we have young people come up to us after doing some Pete Seeger songs. In fact, one concert we were at, this young college student came up and she showed us one of Pete's double CDs, and she said, "This is why I'm here." Somehow she found it.
Well, the pressing thing when we talk about Pete having relevance, we have to always think about whether we have relevance.
Yeah.
And when I'm in schools and they're looking at me, I got this white hair, they ask me, "How old are you?" And I say, "I'm 7 years old." And they say, "How do you stand?" How do you breathe? Of course, music has relevance over the course of time. And Pete was always looking to connect to younger artists and to see what they were doing, but also I think the context is that as we do Pete's music and as we do our own, we have to put that into a context that also opens up an opportunity to say to young people, "So what are you doing? What are you thinking?" It's not a one-way street. We're also learning from whatever they're thinking. And I have to take myself, when I'm on a thing called the Color of Change Video Squad. And so we meet once a month to make videos about issues in the African American community that need to, to have a light shine on them. And we make little videos. And most of the people on there are 20 and 30 somethings. And so I get on there, and most of the time I shut my mouth, because I'm listening to what they're saying, and then I'll pipe in one thing. And that's what Pete did all the time. Pete listened a lot, and then he saw what was relevant around him, and he helped lift that up.
And I think the role that he had in culture is still relevant as well. I mean, when I was on my last UK tour in November, December, our university lecturers were on strike. And in a number of the cities that I was in, they invited me to come down to play a few songs on the picket line. And sometimes they had a PA. Usually they had a PA but no mic stand. So some poor soul had to stand and hold the mic for me. But I found myself, I will be singing the songs that Pete sang. And those kids, they all knew the words of Solidarity Forever. And I think it's a bit like Joe Hill, where people gather on picket lines to sing. That's where you find Pete Seeger. He's with us still.
It's also the concepts, I think, that Pete introduced us to, in the community work that he introduced us to. We wrote a song in response to Greta Thunberg's work, in Sweden, and watched her lift up young activists, youth activists of color all around the country and all around the world, and we've been in communication with the U.S.-based group that Greta helped inspire here, and we've slowly actually been in the process of putting together a video around that song that includes their activism and their videos and stuff from their perspective. And Reggie, you're exactly right. Pete really inspired us to shut our mouths and listen to younger people and to people coming from different perspectives on this. The other thing that we've been doing is collaborating with other performers of color whenever possible, both in the Bay Area and around the country, because that conversation is long overdue, and I think that they didn't necessarily come from the same tradition, but the concepts we share in common, and the desire to work together and to break the mold and to really create something new out of this, I think, is a shared goal.
The next question relates very much to what you were just talking about, Pat. But Sandy, did you want to jump in and say anything about this?
I'm going to just shut my mouth.
So the next question, final question, and then I have an announcement. In all of the 21st century protests from Occupy to the present, we've been missing a singing repertoire like the ones that helped define the civil rights and anti-war movements. Any thoughts about if that is that happening, or does it need to happen? Any
I'm
thoughts?
happy to,
on that?
jump-
Yeah,
I'm happy
Sandy.
to jump on that. So that was a question from the audience. No, that you just said. Yeah. It's more, I think the thing to look at is that the media consolidation of radio, TV, the way it operates right now has a lot to do with the fact that folks don't know that activist music has been written throughout that time and is still being written now. So that's part of the problem. There were a number of years in the middle when we would go to demonstrations and we would be singing something and some young person next to us would say, "When can we chant?" Like they just wanted to chant. But that has actually sort of fallen away a little bit. And the next wave is now here where singing is part of it. We go to a demonstration, well, when it happened down on the border between this country and Mexico, part of the School of the Americas Watch. And these people are young people, 20s, 20-somethings, and organizing this entire big, thousands of people event. And they want music. So there is music out there. You just need to take a little bit of a deeper look and find it somewhere other than where you used to be able to find it, because now commercialized radio is just very consolidated and not friendly to the kind of music that we all do and that younger people are doing right now.
And music from earlier movements also was largely, like if you think about the civil rights movement and things like that, that music was largely centered in the church, and large numbers of people participated in the church, so they knew they had that common musical language, right? But younger people, teens, 20s, 30s, are really, really on fire around this idea of resistance choirs and stuff like that. They're writing new material all the time. There's a Thrive Choir happening in San Francisco. There are song leader groups that are coming together all around the country and around the world, and they're connecting to one another. It's a very powerful, very exciting movement. And sometimes they find us because they've heard one of our songs or something. So it's really nice to have that tie-in, and at the same time be able to experience all of this incredible new music that's being created. It's very exciting.
Great. Yeah, Peter.
So people like there are great people on the radio who do shine a light on this kind of music. People like Wanda Fisher and WAMC, Kate McNally at New Hampshire Public Radio. There's great folk DJs all over the country that play this kind of music. They're not commercial radio, but they are putting these musicians on. And I think I would just urge people to check out some of the young and people of color musicians. I want to just name a few names. Melanie Demore in the San Francisco area, Andres Useche, who's a great Latino musician who shines a light on immigrant issues, Ma Muse, Yara Allen, who works with the Poor People's Campaign, a band called Rising Appalachia, Gene Rowe. These are just some of the kinds of musicians that are creating a whole musician culture relevant to today, including ones that appeal very powerfully to the young activists that I know. We have a place on our website for Songs of the Resistance, and we often shine a light there on these kind of musicians.
Great. Billy, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm just surprised how many kind of demos I go to where the young people are and they want me to sing the old songs. I mean, if I get invited to, for instance, in Cambridgeshire over Christmas, I was invited to come along to the school strike, the Friday school strike there, where the organizer was 10 years old. Guy was 10 years old. He was emailing me. And I said, well, what sort of songs are you singing? And he was saying, well, We Shall Overcome, Solidarity Forever. I'm like, cool. So, I mean, they're kind of plugging into the tradition. I think the great thing about the tradition is it reminds you're not the first person who's been involved in a struggle. You're not the only person this has ever happened to. And the currency of music, whether it's political music or emotional music, whatever kind of music, the currency of music is empathy. And it's not just empathy for the person who's singing the song or empathy for the subject of the song. It's empathy for what the song was about and the context in which it's been used before. And when those kids sing We Shall Overcome, they're connecting with Dr. King, they're connecting with Pete, they're connecting with Rock Against Racism that I was involved in the 70s, because we all sang that song. And it's they have much right to be part of that tradition as any of the rest of us. So I think they are wanting to sing, else they wouldn't ask some old folky geezer like me to come along and sing. Right. I mean, I know it's their teachers want me to come. I understand that. But we still have a role. We still have a role to play in the struggle, and as long as we do, I think these songs will survive, and Pete's legacy will survive.
Well, Pete was also very aware of the fact that arts and education was important, and it wasn't classed in his time as that, as a formal way of teaching. But he was constantly going into schools and constantly going to camps and constantly going to work with kids. It wasn't just about entertainment. It was connecting those songs to stories of the past. And in a lot of the work that I do, either in schools or in my work with the Living Legacy Project, where we actually take students on civil rights pilgrimages, I'm teaching them and we're connecting them to the history of the country, but we're connecting them through the songs. And, I had a case where I had a group of 22 college students who, when I said, and we're going to be singing these songs, and they looked at me like, really? And I said, yeah, we're going to sing. And I didn't push it. But, by Wednesday of the week, we spent 8 days together touring in Alabama and Mississippi. And by Wednesday, they were singing This Little Light of Mine. They were singing Wade in the Water. They on Wednesday led a group of kids when I wasn't even there in a song session. And I said to them, how'd that work out? And they said we were great, So, connecting not only the songs, but connecting them to the stories so that they have some context for how those songs rose up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Speaking of which, let's hear another song.
We just want to, we will, and Emma's Revolution is up next. But I did want to announce that one of Pete Seeger's favorite causes, the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, is in the midst of a major fundraising drive. And if anyone out there can help, just make a donation at clearwater.org. So
/donate. Clearwater.org
/donate. Okay, so we're ready to hear a song written by Emma's Revolution, and Pat and Sandy are going to tell us about it.
I had texted our, at the time, almost 90-year-old friend who was one of Pete's neighbors that we used to stay with whenever we were in the Hudson Valley. And I didn't hear back from her. And Connie Hogarth was always right on top of it. She would get right back to you. She was a consummate activist and still is in her 90s. And when she didn't get back to me, I thought something's a little strange. So I texted her again and didn't hear back. So I called her. I said, Connie, how are you? And she said, I'm at the hospital. Pete's in his last days. So we were in the DC area at the time. I got in the car. Sandy was out of town, and I drove up to New York and arrived there as part of a steady stream of musicians that were coming through Pete's room at his bedside and singing Pete's songs back to him in his last few days. And I said at one point to Tina, well, Guy Davis was there, Peter Yarrow was there, Judy Collins, all kinds of folks that were sort of, raised at Pete's knee culturally, And I said to Tina, when it was clear that Pete was about ready, I said, you've spent your whole life sharing your dad with the whole world. Would you like this time to yourself, just with the family? Because everybody else had pretty much filtered away, except for a few friends and the family there. And she said, no, stay. And Connie and I stayed and circled around his bedside. And he had written, of course, you mentioned cutting wood. He was cutting wood, up to a week and a half before he went into the hospital. And he had set up the fires in the wood stoves at the house. So after he was gone, his daughter, just needed to strike a match to start the fire and warm up the house. And he had written on a piece of cardboard the words to Shakespeare's Sonnet 65. I wish I could quote it. I don't have that memory, so you'll have to look it up. But we read that, each of us, as we passed the little piece of cardboard around the bed. and then sang a couple more of our favorite songs to him as he was taking his final breath. I just thought about all the remarkable ways that he touched my life indirectly and directly. I worked with him for years on the Hudson and sang with him on numerous occasions. And he is the reason I am this kind of songwriter and musician. So recalling those stories and then it of course had to have a chorus for everybody to sing on, because it was required, really, gently, but always required, that we be part of what Pete was doing. It wasn't really about performance, as people have said many times. It was about everybody giving what we have to give to the larger experience, and taking that beautiful metaphor of hope and strength and unity out into the world. So this is the song that came to me. It's called Sing People Sing. When I was 4, I had a toy made of plastic and of joy, a magic musical machine from a drum, a stick and strings. I couldn't know as I would play. I'd live to meet the man one day, playing songs that shaped my life and taught the world to sing. Oh, hear the banjo ring, hear the people sing. Hope changes everything. Sing, people, sing. The summer of my 18th year in San Francisco he'd appear. Jumped onto a trolley car, alone and wondering. The grove was full when I got there. People came from everywhere. I climbed a redwood by the stage to watch the reveling sing. Oh, hear the banjo ring, hear the people sing. Hope changes everything. Sing, people, sing. Here's when I got a call, a festival in early fall along the Hudson River, harvest gathering, asking me to volunteer to keep the river clean and clear, to celebrate the river's life and all the gifts she brings. Oh, hear the banjo ring, hear the people sing. Hope changes everything. People sing. Stood up to McCarthy's rage, rallied for a living wage, rode with Woody, marched with Dr. King. Patiently brought us along, taught us each and every song. With Toshi by your side, you could do most anything. You showed us how the world can, living with integrity. Together we create a force beyond imagining. As I observed your dimming light, I felt a spark in me ignite. But I would trade it all today to hear your banjo ring. Oh, hear the banjo ring, hear the people sing. Hope changes everything. Sing, people, sing. Oh, hear the banjo ring, hear the people sing.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo. That was
Fabulous.
wonderful.
Beautiful.
song.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, our last question is about hope. I'd like to ask Pat and Sandy, you've just sung about it, but what gives you hope right now?
You know, I was thinking about it in the sense of the large and the small. So, as I mentioned, we're doing these songwriting workshops. So it's a group of people, like 9 people on a Zoom call, or 5 people, or 11 people. And sometimes people are coming in really distraught from the experience of being so isolated, or somebody they know dying, and being able to engage their creativity and their sense of community, and they write something and you can see it on their faces and in the way they hold their body, that they have been able to sort of come back to some sense of love and joy. So I think that connection, the small connections of community, give me hope. And then seeing that people are still taking action in socially distant ways on the larger scale gives me hope that we will continue to push against not only this administration, which we really need to, but just the rise of oppressive, administrations around the world. So the fact that people are still driving their cars around detention centers and saying, we know what you're doing in there, close those detention centers, gives me hope.
In a way, when we're out touring, we get a huge amount back from our audiences, and that's really great in the moment. But there's a way in which our work is also weirdly isolating when we're on the road. We don't get to hear one another as often as we would like to, because we're all working at the same time. And a strange upside to this social isolation is that by way of the internet, we can actually travel to places that would be hard for us to get to financially or whatnot, just in terms of stringing together those gigs, because they're a little bit more out of the way. And we're able to go to those places now and to reach those folks that we haven't always been able to reach. And so that's been a remarkable outcome. But there's also a way in which we're actually reaching many more people than we ever have been, by way of these different platforms. Many, many more people are logging in than we ever could reach in a room. And that's a surprising outcome, an incredibly hopeful outcome. We've also been reached out to by other colleagues, in the community and in the business, who've said, I've been listening to your stuff online. I never really got a chance to before, and we'd love to have you be part of our project. We've been probably weirdly busier than we ever have been since we've been in one place. And I get to be with my family, and I get to be with San, and I get to do much more music. We did so much more of the business stuff and the other stuff, and it's always been the music and the connection to people that's given me hope. And now we have a lot of that. I feel really, really grateful for that. Really,
that's great.
Charged.
Reggie, what gives you hope right now?
2 things give me hope all the time. I come from a history of people who started their life in this country as slaves. Family on a plantation in Virginia in the 1800s. And part of a larger community that has been working for and singing about the issues that we are still singing about now for 300 years. And they produce songs like Wade in the Water and Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, and a resilience that I tap into all the time. So that is a constant source of hope for me on the days when I'm feeling frustrated, or I feel like I can't, get my Wi-Fi working, or or I feel like all my gigs have been canceled. They didn't have gigs except for slavery. The second thing that gives me hope all the time is that in 2008 I had a liver transplant, and after almost dying, I woke up into a world of hope and possibility. And I made a promise to myself in that time that every day I would think of a small thing that connected me. And one of those small things is that whenever I look into the faces, either of school audiences or audiences, period, I promised myself coming out of that liver transplant that I would, in any performance, look into the face of everybody in the room at least once. And I would see the light that was shining in their face as I sang. And I've pretty much managed to keep that going. So those two things, except on certain days, make it pretty impossible for me not to feel hope.
Oh, thank you. That was lovely. Billy, what gives you hope?
Well, I live in kind of rural coastal Dorset, miles from where I come from in East London. It's a pretty, I wouldn't say right-wing area, but the Conservative Party have provided the Member of Parliament here since 1886. And it doesn't look like changing anytime soon. So you can sometimes think you're the only Guardian reader in the village, that kind of place. But every Thursday night, we go out into the streets and the fields and we applaud. It initially began applauding our National Health Service workers, our frontline medical workers. But it's now expanded to include our people working in care homes, people, those people who are keeping us connected in terms of working in the mail, those people who are shop workers, the people who are taking the trash, everybody who's still working, putting their own health on the line in order to allow us to carry on keeping ourselves safe. And the village is about half a mile away, but I can hear that applause rolling up the hill. Even when the wind's blowing in off the sea, which can be quite loud, I can hear people banging their pots and pans. And that just fills me with a sense that once this is over, we won't forget those people working in the front line. We won't forget those key workers who keep us healthy, who keep us safe, who keep us fed, who keep us connected. Those people who are out there while we're shuttering ourselves away from the greatest threat that we've faced in our lifetimes. And I believe that this will give us a complete change of consciousness of where we are and who we are. And we won't forget, it's a new normal. It's the coming of a new normal. This is the silver lining of this particular cloud.
Annie, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I totally agree with what everybody's been saying. The hope that's there is in the little things that people are doing and the huge big things that people are recognizing are going on. One little thing on our street is I just had this idea of trying to get together with my neighbors from the end of our driveways. And we live on a little suburban street on a cul-de-sac, and not everybody wanted to come outside and sing together, but some of us did. And, my neighbor across the street directs the local Black gospel choir in town. And another neighbor is a phenomenal musician and an opera singer. And so we all just sang, and it sounded horrible, but it was so much fun. I mean, it sounded bad because you still have a latency when you're singing from 50 feet away from each other. But the fun was watching my neighbor Jackie, trying to direct everybody with her body and dancing and laughing. And, we have complete tragedies happening. And at the same time, we are realizing and remembering how resilient we are. And part of what Pete's message was to all of us, and I think we're getting it, is we're resilient if we remember to be kind to each other and reach out to each other, and remember that anything like this that we were saying, dream bigger. It's really what's hopeful to me.
Peter, what do you want to say?
So I am a huge fan of YouTube. YouTube, to me, allows people to connect. It kind of gets away from that thing of the big corporate interests that used to control who could put out records and who got radio play. I just can't believe that, for instance, Pete Seeger wrote a song called Rainbow Race, which is a very hopeful song. And when a white nationalist slaughtered a whole lot of socialist young people at a summer camp near Oslo, the next night, 5,000 people were in the center square of Oslo, and a folk singer was leading them in a Norwegian translation of this song, holding up candles and lighters and things like that. You can watch that on YouTube. If somebody writes a new song, if we record a song called The Tide is Rising, suddenly maybe thousands of people, somebody emails it out, can see Annie singing that song. We can see Pete Seeger, even though he's gone, you can see him singing at a concert, If I Had a Hammer, in Australia in the 60s. So both new things that are emerging, or and these old, I love watching Nina Simone singing a little Paris cafe in the 60s. When could you have ever before seen Nina Simone sing 50 years or 60 years earlier and see her face? It's amazing. So if I get discouraged, I just watch videos, or maybe I watch Greta Thunberg, telling the truth to the world. That is available to all of us all the time.
Wonderful. So we have one more song, the last song. And before we go to that, I just wanted to give a big thank you to all of our guests for sharing their memories of Pete and for carrying on his work every day. And also thank you to everyone in the audience. Thank you for joining this birthday celebration. Websites, contact information for the film and for our guests are on Songkeeper's YouTube channel, which we're on now, and at songkeepers.ca. So you'll have access to all that after the show, and this conversation will also be posted. And finally, a shout out to my co-producer, Candy Paltiel, and to Jim Henry for all their hard work behind the scenes today and all week.
Can we thank you, Polly, for being our moderator here today and for really seeing the story in the life of Annie and Peter and Pete and deciding to make that film from what you saw. So
this film took 8 years, and boy, it was worth waiting.
7
years. Okay, it was a long time.
Seems like 8 years.
Like 2.
Thank you for your artistry and for your vision on that.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll hand it over to Annie and Peter, and they can talk about the song they're going to sing, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
All right. Well, we're going to do one last song here. I just want to acknowledge that all the musicians here today are all part of the same union. We're all members of AFM Local 1000 Traveling Musicians Union. And, Pete really believed in unions. I know that, Woody Guthrie was a really important mentor to Pete, but it also, Pete would say, it just makes common sense. So we thought we would end with a song that Pete wrote called Step by Step. And the words are taken from the first, the constitution of the very first miners union in the United States. And Pete ended up putting the lyrics together and putting them to the tune of a traditional Irish air. And my good buddy, Charlie King, another union brother of our union, and I put this arrangement together. And I just think this song speaks to us about what we've been talking about this whole time, that we need community, we need each other, we need music more than ever, we need a way to support each other. And so here's Step by Step. Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none. Step by step the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none. Step by step the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none, singly none.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for being with us. So see you again soon.
Enjoy.
Been great fun.
Bye-bye.
Farewell, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
That was my brother on the phone, by the way. If anyone's worried, it was only my brother. That's okay. I'll speak to him.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
we said hi.
It's all cool. It's all cool.
Much love, y'all.
Great to see you all. We love you.
Yeah.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.